Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic and welcome to What is Wednesday. Today we're talking about Pokémon. Before we get too far into this, I want to explain that I'm going to be using the pronunciation Pokémon. That is because of the accent, that's the way that people seem to agree that it's supposed to be pronounced, but a lot of people do pronounce it Pokemon or Pokémon, and so I'm going to be going with the Pokémon and Pokéball, etc. So there is a big argument over how to truly pronounce it, but I'm going with that. Pokémon, which is a shortened version of the original Japanese name Pocket Monsters, was first released in 1996, but became international in 1998. So let's start with the basic concept. The Pokémon franchise revolves around trainers who are able to capture and tame these monsters, by capturing them inside what are called Pokéballs. These trainers want to 1. Collect them all, and 2. Build up the best team of Pokémon available and train them to be the very best, able to defeat other Pokémon and other trainers. The ultimate goal is to become a Pokémon Master, someone who is the absolute best of the best. Wait, back up. These Pokémon live inside a ball? These Pokéballs have caused many theories about what exists inside, but it's never been clearly articulated. Some references have led fans to believe that the Pokémon is crammed inside the ball and just waits to get set free, which is rather inhumane. But there are also contradictory theories that the Pokéball contains a virtual reality of sorts, where the Pokémon lives in comfort until it's called forth. Both of these are just theories though. As a nice human being, I'm hoping for the second option. Now back to the games. When a Pokemon game comes out, there are usually multiple versions, which is something fairly unique. For example, when the game launched in Japan, you could either buy the red or the green version. Each one was mostly the same, but they had a few exclusive Pokemon, or maybe the rarities of the Pokemon were different. Players could do research beforehand and buy the version in which their ideal team might be easier to achieve. When it launched in the US, there were red and blue versions, with the addition of a yellow version later. The yellow version focused on the Pokemon known as Pikachu, who is your default starter Pokemon. In this first generation of Pokemon games, there were 151 different Pokemon to choose from. However, this does include evolutions of a Pokemon, for example, so Charmander can evolve into Charmeleon and then into Charizard. These are 3 different Pokemon by definition. In 1999, the second generation of Pokemon began with the Gold, Silver, and Crystal games being released. These added another 100 new Pokemon to the list. Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald released in 2002, and then Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum releasing in 2006. In 2010, we saw the release of Pokemon Black and White, and just a few years later we got a Black and White 2 released. This is actually the first time that we really saw somewhat of a sequel, even though it followed a different character. Pokemon X and Y are the latest games to be released in 2013, as of the making of this video. The total number of Pokemon introduced throughout the whole series? 720. That's a lot. Remember back when I mentioned Pikachu and the yellow edition of the game? In 1997, the Pokemon television show began, which featured Ash Ketchum as a young trainer who had his starter Pokemon, Pikachu. The yellow game came out just after that series, probably to help capitalize on the interest and excitement about Pikachu as a character. Nintendo even collaborated with Volkswagen to release a Pikachu-themed new Beetle at the time, with characteristics of Pikachu. This Pokemon television show is now hitting its 19th season on television. There have also been about 18 movies released in conjunction with the show as well. In addition to the video games, there's also an immensely popular card game focused on Pokemon. This game, which combines the mythology and basics of Pokemon with some of the mechanics of popular collectible card games, has had over 60 sets of cards published, spanning from 1996 till now. There are even huge tournaments where people gather to play this game together. I could probably do an entire video on just the game, but it's just a piece of the larger Pokemon world. Even if you don't know much about the franchise, some of Pokemon's characters have become well-known icons. Pikachu is the most obvious example. Pokemon has even been parodied in a lot of ways, in different television shows and movies, my favorite probably being the South Park episode focused on Shin Pokémon. Here's another interesting thing that happened. There was an episode of the Pokemon television show that featured a strobe-like effect, and it was so intense that it actually caused over 600 children in Japan to be rushed to hospitals with epileptic seizures. That episode has never been re-aired, and it even holds a Guinness World Record for most photosensitive epileptic seizures caused by a television show. So what's up with the Pokemon now? 2016 marks the 20-year anniversary of Pokemon, and several of the classic games are being re-released with updated graphics. A Pokemon version of the hit fighting game Tekken is being released. called Pokken Tournament, which allows you to actually control your Pokemon as you brawl other monsters. A mobile game is also being released called Pokemon Go in 2016 that allows you to find Pokemon in the real world via your cell phone. It's hard to talk too much about some of these projects as they haven't really been released yet, but it looks like Pokemon is still in a very good place, with all of these new renditions and revivals. In terms of income, Pokemon is the second best-selling video game franchise of all time, second only to Mario. They earned over $2 billion in the year 2014 alone, so it's clear that the franchise still has a lot of life in it. Hopefully that gives you a little insight into the world of Pokemon. It started as a video game but has since blossomed into a multimedia franchise, including card games, cartoons, and movies, and even characters that have become cultural icons. Check back next Wednesday for another What Is video, and thanks for watching.
Gotta catch 'em all.